And one downside with your headset, Martin, is that it's quite crackly. It's easy to you rub it against the cloth, I guess. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if I muted this or not. Well, whatever. It's 9 o'clock. Let's start. Welcome to the bi-weekly Media Over QUIC virtual interim. This is the second to last one before Madrid. We'll meet again on July 7th, which is a Monday, not a Wednesday. This is the note well. I don't know that anyone has joined us that's new, but this expresses a number of IETF policies related to the intellectual property implications you being here, as well as a code of conduct. If you're unfamiliar with this, now would be a great time to type IETF note well into your favorite search engine and educate yourself about some of the background to IETF participation. Okay, this is the second week, so the second meeting in our MediaCo experiment. I believe everyone is familiar with the raise hands button at the bottom. It allows you to join the MOQ, which also allows you to participate in shows of hands. In general, you should leave your audio and video off. However, when you are anticipating speaking, or if you are in a back and forth, just go ahead and leave at least your mic on. There's about a second of latency or so between pressing unmute and actually your sound coming up. So again, I would encourage you to unmute yourself in anticipation of saying something. So if you're in a back and forth, or if you're next in the queue and you're about to come up, just go ahead and unmute yourself. It'll make things go way better. If you have headphones, they're recommended because noise cancellation's not as good as some other tools, quite frankly. And obviously, if you're presenting, just turn on your audio and video so we can see you and hear you more easily. Oh, and I should mention, we now have Slack integration. You may see on the left there, in the chat tab, that Slack messages are coming through to Zulip. I'm not sure if the other thing is true, but either way, it's going to go in the archive. So we've had a pretty active chat session last time when we used MediaCo. So feel free to put stuff in the chat and it will be noticed. We do need a scribe for today. This meeting is being recorded. As always, we do not need a verbatim transcription of everything that we have done, that we say today. That's what the recording is for. It is in fact bad because people that want a quick summary do not want to read the verbatim transcription. Just make a note of the key points, the things that the main decisions that were made. That's all we're looking for in a scribe.
So I can scribe after my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Suhas. Can somebody help out Suhas while he's presenting today?
If all you need is someone to record the outcome from the discussion, I can do it.
Thank you, Alan. All right. Moving on, this is today's agenda. We're in administrative review right now. We're going to get a brief interrupt report from Mike English about the virtual interrupt that we did, I guess, a week ago. Then Suhas is going to talk about a new issue / PR that he's filed. And then we're going to revisit the parameterize all the things discussion. And Ian has an extended discussion about that. And I think that is a pretty optimistic guess what we can get through today. If for some reason we have some time, then we'll allow editors free for all in terms of running through PRs, but I'm skeptical. Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Martin. Let me see. Can I share slides? How does this work? Share from virtual hackathon. Okay, I uploaded a newer version at the very last minute, but that's fine. So we met last week for a virtual interop hackathon. Several of us attended via Zoom, and several people participated asynchronously. MOQ was very far behind, so personally, I spent a lot of that time that people were online reviewing the change set between draft 7 and draft 11. And towards the end of that time, I made some updates to setup, but I still have more work to do. Other people had already achieved some degree of interop at Stockholm and spent this time kind of honing and building on that, basically achieving interop on more features. And it was very helpful to have some public relays and things like date servers available, particularly for both remote interop testing and for especially the async participants, because having a server online that you can test against independently makes things much simpler. The downside of that is not being able to see logs from the other side and knowing exactly how things were interpreted on the other end. So there are some trade-offs, but on the whole, it is helpful to have those servers up and running and be able to test implementations against those. So one of the things that came up, I say it probably approximately everyone is frustrated with the rate of change to the wire format. It feels like we're spending an inordinate amount of time making updates for things that are not really new features per se, but kind of optimizations of the wire image. And it would be nice to have maybe batching those changes a little bit more, or minimizing those changes. So everybody's looking forward to a smaller diff of wire format changes in draft 12. I think the main thing that we're doing there is adding publish, and I think that should help us with interop for Madrid. So reminder to update the interop spreadsheet, and also if there are new implementations, you can add those to the wiki page that we have for interop.
Mike, I approved the new slides. If there's anything else you wanted to brief, you could
sure,
share.
I can share. Let me do that. There we go. So this is basically more detail on the things I had before. So we had a number of participants from the Moxygen implementation. Mathis has a Go implementation mock transport. Ivan has Warp Player and mock live server. There's an implementation that builds on Mathis's Go mock transport implementation. And then asynchronously, we had QUIC and Mocktail also testing against some of the public servers that we're running. Yeah, so the slides have links to the spreadsheet if people want to update based on their experiences, and also the wiki if people want to list more implementations or see other implementations. Some people have, there's kind of mixed feelings about publishing information about publicly running servers for obvious reasons. But But if people are willing to like publicize their public servers, that might be helpful to keep in the wiki as well. I think that would make it easy for more people to find that information and to test with it. Did anybody else who participated want to say anything else?
Alan.
Yeah, more about your comment about low wire image churn. I guess I want to apologize to everyone. Like, I joined as an editor and I got very overzealous about trying to close out our 150 issues, and that resulted in a big wire image change in 11. And I hear everyone saying, don't do that. So I at the same time, I would like to close things as much as possible. And often people file issues for these wire image changes in there. Easy to understand what the change is going to be. So maybe I have a question for the group, which is like, when would be a good time to land a batch of those, just so that we know.
Will.
So different topic. I'm not answering Alan's question, but this was to Mike. So thanks for all the interop work. Now that you're gainfully employed, what's MOQ-RS's update from your side? Are you going to continue working on it on the side? Is it an active project? Is it something people who are looking at building out relays can rely upon going forward into the future?
Yeah, so I have built upon MOQ-RS. I have basically a hard fork of that that I'm using internally right now. But I am planning to periodically make updates to the open source version. And when I reach a point where my internal implementation has evolved in the ways that I want to, there will be new components that I intend to open source. So MOQ-RS is in kind of an awkward stage right now because I'm not putting a lot of cycles to the open source branch of that right now. But I do intend to continue open sourcing work that I'm doing.
Okay, great, thanks.
Suhas?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Alan saying that, like, we've been holding off some of the major wire changes for a while so that we can batch, and we are at the point where we are making those changes. And definitely, there's no easy answer to say when is the right time. But for all this, like almost 10 versions, we held on quite a bit of wire changes, and maybe the next few versions expected to have some changes. I'm not sure, so that we can. This is kind of amount of work we had been holding on for a while as well, right? So it might come in the next few drafts more than what it had been earlier. But then I'm expecting that peak would go down once those things are in. That's my opinion on that one.
Let me talk about the path forward here, and then maybe that will, as an individual, provide an answer to Alan's question. So draft 12, by the way, thank you, Mike, and thank you for serving as interop, Czar. So we expect a draft 12 shortly, I think in a matter of days, and that will be interop target for Madrid. There will also be a draft 13 that, that is published 2 weeks before Madrid that is not worthy of interop target. And our next interop would then be in September at the Toronto interim. So as an individual, I would say, Alan, maybe draft 13 is a good opportunity to drop some wire image changes, because then people have 2 months to implement them.
Okay, if folks agree, that's final. There's not that much time between now and the draft deadline's July 7. So I don't know how many. There's a few that are up now. For example, there's an optimization to how fetch responses come back. Ian has a PR up about delta encoding object IDs within a stream. So like we can land a few, but I don't know how many like other random ones we can go grab before the 7th. But I think we could also drop another wire breaking one, say like a month before the September interop and that, 14 or something, if people wanted to have some time there.
Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to Ellen for landing all the issues. Like, it is helpful to get through stuff. And I understand that a lot of these things are, small and obvious changes that are easy to understand. It's more of, paper cuts as you're like going through and trying to update for each draft version. It can be frustrating to be like, why is this not parsing correctly? Like, this is yet another thing that has shifted under me. So I think that just more awareness of like when those changes are going to come in, and kind of like batching them, maybe having some updates where we're not changing all the minutia, and then other updates where we change a whole bunch of those things and everybody knows like that's going to come through. So maybe draft 13 is a good opportunity for that.
I get there's no perfect answer, and I'm thankful for us moving stuff forward. So, but I do think that one of the things that we could do a little, maybe use more, is when we're talking about the changes we're going to drop in as these type of breaking changes, is group them up into large bins of related functionality. What I mean by that is, look, there's a ton that have to do with basically various forms of making compression better or saving bandwidth, right? But that could be a big set. I think we're going to have a big set around extensibility, like going and making all the parts we need to be extensible. That could be a bit. I mean, maybe coming out of this discussion around parameters, which I've as we started implementing that, I feel much stronger about it than I did before we started implementing it. There's a patch around that type of thing, but instead of just having it be like drafts that have wire breaking changes or not wire breaking changes, try and bin them up so that we try and cover all the issues to do with sort of a group of functionality at a point in time. Might help make this easier for implementers a little bit.
I put myself in the queue to make another statement as an individual. I endorse what everyone has said, but I also want to caution against kind of waiting too long. Like shipping wire image changes, number one, obviously closes issues, and we all like to be neat and close issues. But furthermore, I think groups are starting to tiptoe towards deploying this thing and maintaining multiple version support for multiple versions when the wire image changes a lot is hard. So I mean, I don't know exactly when Google will try to put something on the internet, but I would hate to have to manage two versions with like radically different wire images. So like the more we can do now when no one's really deployed, as far as I know, well, I don't think that's true. Some people have deployed, but when few people have deployed, would be valuable.
Okay. Yeah. I think whatever. I think we need to move on, so we actually get to this topic, etc. But I guess more discussion is possible, mainly story in Slack. So how's?
Can I ask Chase to control the presentation, if that's okay?
Yes. Let me.
Thank you.
Okay.
I did it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks. Cool. I'll just to give, I would like to talk about a new requirement about allowing end subscribers to request original publishers to start a new group. That's basically starting a new sync point in a track. This is partly driven by interactive use cases, wherein in conferencing kind of system or real-time use cases, but we feel it can go well beyond certain just the interactive flows. So I'll start with giving some background context and extend that to some general use cases and propose a solution, and we can discuss if that solution makes sense or a different form of the solution makes sense or not. Next slide, please. Yeah, just to give some background context, it's very typical in any large-scale video conferences that whenever new participants join a meeting, they would request some form of a new iframe to be generated, so that because the typically in the conferences, the groups or the GOPs, that what we call for videos, they are not static. and they don't generate every X number of seconds or anything. So whenever participants join, they need to have some sync point, a new iframe to be generated. And there are some ways the conference systems manage that so that you can cache parts of it, but the basic underlying requirement is that when participants join, they would need a new sync point. And this is something is today supported in WebRTC and most of the large-scale video conferencing projects like Zoom, Teams, and others. And we feel this is one place where real-time video flows and the streaming video flows slightly different, slightly differ because of the requirements being slightly different between the COP sizes being static versus dynamic. Next slide, please. Cool. If I want to kind of take that requirement and put in some set of flows where we would like something like this, is that the first one would be where you subscribe, as I explained previously, as you subscribe to a track with dynamic group sizes versus static group sizes. A typical example would be Alice here subscribes to a track and she finds out that she's 30 seconds behind or more from the beginning of the group. There are two options, right? The Alice can go and fetch the things from the cache. If she gets the answer from the cache, she can sync up quickly and everything is fine. If not, there's no way to ask the publisher to have the new idea or a keyframe generated, and it might not always be practical to have the things in the cache. And another related flow is that where the publishers might be on, the original publishers might be on resource constrained network or devices, and having having a requirement to generate a static groups every 2 seconds or 5 seconds may not work. Even if a static group which is like 30 seconds, again, it has an impact on somewhere else in the system, like the caching system. So it's not always possible to have the publishers to have static group. Another use case in conferences, which is very, very common use case, is to have this active speaker switching in conferences. This is the case where you have a grid layout of some participants that you want to show based on the end user's display constraints, but you can show only N out of M speakers, M participants. So what the conference system will do is that dynamically, based on the audio activity level of various speakers, it picks the top 4 speakers, for example, and says these are the 4 speakers which should be rendered on the receivers. And whenever something like this happens, all the receivers need to know the new sync point for the new speakers that show up. And this needs to be done at the real time in a scale, because we want to hear someone and also see someone almost at the same time, and any a gap between hearing and seeing them has terrible user experience. Last but not the least, even if the original publisher can cache the data, they might not be able to serve the fetch request because their upstream bandwidth is totally consumed by serving the subscription request. In these cases, even though your data might be in the cache on the original publishers, it might not be able to really serve the cache request because it wants to make sure the live stream gets the highest priority. Some of these cases basically have the same underlying requirement that if subscribers wants to be able to be useful in the group, to be able to have the group useful for them, they need to ask the original publisher to generate a new keyframe or start a new group. Next slide. So here is the proposal. I'll give the message format here, and I'll also go through a few examples, and we can discuss if that makes sense or not. This proposal is that introduce a new message called new group message. The only important thing about this message is this field called largest group. The largest group is populated by the end subscriber, by basically taking whatever it finds out from the either track status or from the latest subscribe OK. So this reflects the current understanding of the largest group as from the end subscriber's perspective. This message basically is saying the relays or the relay network to this is the most recent group I've observed, but I'm not able to use this group for the reasons I mentioned earlier. So I would like to original publisher to start a new sync point for me or start a new group, and that's how the protocol triggers. And one of the a few main goals that we want to keep with this design of this new group message and how the MOQ release and the original publisher work to make it happen is we want to keep the signaling minimal, so that we don't want every end subscriber coming in and asking for a new group to have a lot of signaling flood happen, which is kind of in a way what happens today with RTP or the real-time the web parties or the conferences where you have the keyframe request flood might happen. And also the second important requirement is that we would like to use MOQ's ability to how do we aggregate, or wherever we can leverage cache, we want to use those protocol components to the maximum benefit. And also we would like to keep the demand on the original publisher, so that we don't want it to be flooded with a lot of these requests to generate a new keyframe. Martin, you have a question?
Yeah, why don't you need the full track name here? What am I missing?
Oh, I think the request ID should maybe the request ID should match to the subscribe that came in.
Oh,
but
okay, right, all right. I wasn't sure if it was a request generated by, this was a request or it was referring to a different request. Great, thanks.
You're right, because in my in the PR it says the full track name. Maybe the way when I copied and pasted it might be wrong, but that's something. Yes, I agree with you. Thanks for the input. I'll try to see if I can get it fixed. Magnus, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have a question on the use case related. I mean, one normally in RTP based with central units, etc., it's the central unit or even the sender that indicates like speech activity, etc. But it sounds like you talked about the receiver noticing that they would need to keyframe. I don't quite understand how that works. Rather than, wouldn't it need to be sender driven that I have something new when it's for the active speaker switching? Isn't that separate from the late joiners kind of cases and other cases?
I'm not sure about all the way the conference product works, but typically the way the two requirements we need, right? One is that subscribers joining in and they're not able to leverage either the caching that's there or any way for them to get a sync point so that they can start rendering, because the groups are so dynamic. On the other hand, in typical in at least our implementation of active speaker switching, when the FIR request comes from the receivers, that's when you basically tell the publisher or the sender to start sending a keyframe. And also if sender, if there's a really a change in the CNOT happens where that requires sending a the keyframe, that happens regardless. So that is not being changed by this proposal. A sender can generate keyframe whenever he wants to generate. There's no requirement on that.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, let's. I just wonder if you were mixing in things which wasn't obvious that it belonged here, or I understand the other use cases clearly needs receivers towards publisher requests. So.
Right. Thank you. MO.
Will,
yeah, two questions to us. It seems like we're spending an RTT here. You make a subscribe, you get back a subscribe, okay, that's one RTT, and then we issue this group message, right? Because it has to carry the largest group. This is precisely when we actually want to join this stream quickly. Why not make this group a flag or an attribute inside the original subscribe, so that it wouldn't have to come back to us when the subscribe okay. The subscribe would just trigger keyframe generation, and you could subscribe to next group, right? So you would automatically get the next group that the original publisher then produces.
Right. I think how do you want to code it on the wire? We can definitely. I'm not attached to this particular way to solve it. I'm open, but I would like to get to the requirement where how do we can get an agreement on something like this is needed, where we would like to trigger from the original subscriber publisher. But yeah, I'm open to how do you want to design it to work. And I have a few slides that explains how this works, and maybe we can come back and discuss that point again, Will, if that's okay. Go ahead, Mo.
The Magnus, real quick. Even in your case, Magnus, the SFU itself needs this mechanism to go request the original senders. So even if you have a centrally managed conference. The receiver in that case is the SFU. So it still needs this mechanism to get a keyframe from the senders whenever it decides that the other receivers that have joined or have errors need to sync up. So it's also needed in that case. And real quick on Will's point, I think hopefully Suhas will get this in later slides, but it's important to realize that relays have an aggregation function when they receive this message, and it's very much similar to a subscribe update. And I think some people have mentioned why not do this as a subscribe update, and having it as an optional parameter in both subscribe and subscribe update may satisfy what Will wants, and it may also make it obvious that there's aggregation involved in the relays to the normal subscribe aggregation rules and subscribe update aggregation rules. So maybe that's something that we can consider. And the other final point is on the applications and use case. I think I heard earlier that people were saying, well, this is video specific. Why don't you have like a RTCP channel as a track and, you know, and manage things that way? I don't think this is video specific. This is in general, any kind of Delta encoded content. So it could be the catalog. You don't want to accumulate 1,000 catalog entries. And so when you join, you say, I want the new group of the catalog. I want the full catalog. I don't want to fetch it and fetch, you know, 1,000 different Delta updates to it. I want the full non-Delta encoded absolute thing. So it's a very general use case for any kind of Delta coded content. That's it.
Thank you, man. Next slide. So I'll go to a few use cases, how this aggregation works and how this entire thing works, and we can come back as more and we'll be talking about some of the proposals. So here, the context here is that in this example, we have three relays, relay 1 and 2, both are connected to the relay 3, and we have publisher. And right now, everyone, their current latest group is group 22, and the media is flowing. So at this point in time, two subscribers come and ask for, say, group 22. And they're coming on 2 different relays, and the relay knows that, okay, the request is coming for group 22. I'm on group 22. That means that the subscriber needs a sync point, so it will forward that new group message or sends another new group message upstream to relay 3. But relay 3 just aggregates it because it says it sees 2 new group messages for the same group, and it knows that only one is sufficient, as we do with the subscription update, subscription aggregation today, and that will forward that on to the publisher. And publisher is a happy case where publisher realizes that the new group needs to be generated. It generates group 23 on the data stream, which flows all the way back from the original publisher to the end subscribers. So there is no new group response or error message. It's more like a new group message will be implicitly satisfied when the subscribers or the relays basically see on the data stream a change in the object in the group that's been generated based on the previous new group that went out. So this way, both the subscribers start seeing objects coming from group 23, and their new group request is implicitly satisfied that way as well. Next slide, if there's no questions on this one. Will, do you have a question on the previous slide?
I do. Sorry, I wasn't pressing the button quick enough. Can you go back and just clarify? You said the relay is going to aggregate these messages. These messages are going to be processed in less than a millisecond. So if I got 5 messages arriving 2 milliseconds apart, and my keyframes are spaced out 30 seconds, I don't want 5 keyframes generated. So it seems to me there has to be some time interval that we define that's different to caching objects, right? Because we don't actually cache messages anywhere in our architecture. So there needs to be some time base over which, if the relay gets the same message request within this wall clock interval, that it doesn't propagate it.
So I think if you if you go through the next slide, maybe that kind of handles that one, where we don't need time, but we can still make it happen. So let's take this example here, right, where the subscriber 1 asks for the new group. It went to relay 1, and there's no pending new group for 22, so it just forwards it to publisher upstream. And then, say within like a millisecond or 2, new group request for subscriber 2 came, and publisher has not yet done anything at this point in time, or maybe it's sending, is propagating. The new group has been propagated. We don't know at this point in time. But the relay, as far as the relay 1 is considered, it basically does not have to do anything more, because it knows that an upstream request has been gone. It does nothing. So eventually, when the timer, the will that you're talking about, is implicit in that sense that
it's implicitly the time for the response to come back in this case. Okay.
Right.
But what if, and that time might be 5 milliseconds, but what if in fact the origin, which is resource constraint, says, I don't want to be making keyframes every 10 milliseconds, right? Just because, or 20 milliseconds, just more than this response interval. We might want to decouple the two. Right now, you do have a period over which you aggregate, but it's very much bound to the RTT. That's probably not what it should be bound to. It should be bound to some characteristic of that track.
I think if I understand your request correctly here, the origin or the publisher in this picture is the one you don't want that to be sending multiple of those responses. You don't want it to be starting new group every 2 milliseconds just because a new thing came. And the point here is that there are two things that will not let it happen. One is that each publisher has to see what the new group request for the group number is, and if it's already published something greater than that, it is a no op. I have the 2 more slides that talks about that one. And yes, on the publisher, we need to have some text that basically says that you need to make that decision carefully, because you don't want to be responding for every new group request that comes in. That's definitely there.
I just want to interject before MOQ goes. So I did run a timer, but it's not important we get to parameters today, so I'm happy to give it the time it needs. But Suhas, I do want to focus this. What are you hoping to achieve in this presentation? Like, there is a PR. Are you looking for feedback on that PR? Are you going to use this feedback to redo the PR? What's your
like? I have 2 more slides that talks about the different flows. Okay. And one of the things I need is that I want to see how do we proceed further. This is a requirement that I think is needed to support the conferencing use cases as well as other use cases that Mo also pointed out. And I want feedback from the working group on how do we make that PR to go to the next step.
Okay, I'm going to close the queue soon. So if you want in on this slide, do so soon.
If it's okay, I'll go through the slides and we can take the questions later. Cool. Next slide, please. Okay, in this case, this use case shows that by the time the new group request for 22 came all the way to the publisher for whatever reason had already started, because there was a change in the scene or whatever reason, it already has started publishing group 23. So in this, when the new group request comes to the publisher, basically in this case, the relay 3, it has started receiving group objects from group 23. So it basically is a no op at the relay 3. So when the objects actually go all the way back to the end subscribers, they know that new group got requested. So what's happening here is that the new group for the 22 is never forwarded to the publisher in this case. Next slide. This is very similar to the previous one, where by the time the relays are all on group 22, and by the time the new group request for 22 went all the way to the publisher had already started publishing 23, and the group request for 22 is lesser than the current group, the largest group of the publisher. So it's typically a no op, and publisher has to do nothing here other than continuing publishing on group 23. And when the objects eventually end up on across the relays and the end subscribers, they know that the new group of 22 was satisfied implicitly there. Next slide. Yeah, this goes back to the point. We can discuss this maybe later, but this goes back to the point of, can we make update the subscribe or subscribe update to have some functionality like this? Yes, going back to like Ian's way, this kind of a coding on the wire, we can make it work one way or the other way. We need to, if you're using subscribe or subscribe update to achieve the same functionality, the important thing is that we need to update the aggregation rules whenever this parameter or field is set, where the subscribers are asking to generate the new group. That has to be updated based on the rules, some of the rules that's in the PR or in the slide. I think at this point in time, I think the next slide is just what do we do next? I'm open to questions and discussions.
Yeah, like we have only so much time. So if you have spelling issues with this, like please make it brief, and let's try to focus time mostly on the big qualitative rocks here. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mo.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to get agreement on is, do people agree that this is an important mechanism both for conferencing and in general for all other use cases, so we can go ahead and figure out what's the right spelling. I think that's the first point to make sure that everybody agrees on, so we can start working on this. And then on Will's issues, I think it's important to conceptually think of this, regardless of how the final spelling ends up on the wire, it's conceptually subscription state. This is something that a relay must maintain as subscription state. And so whenever it receives these new group messages or parameters and subscribe update, it looks at its current subscription state and it determines whether or not this should be propagated upstream or not. So don't think of this as aggregating some other kind of new message. It's basically looking at the current subscription state and having something extra in the subscription state to maintain this. And when we designed this, we figured out that we don't need timers. We wanted to avoid having something that specifies timing by including this group number. You can think of it as you just do a subscribe update with the start group number filter as the next group that you want. Conceptually, that's as simple as it is, but there needs to be a separate flag because you have to disambiguate the relay. Disambiguate. Does that user just want to wait until that group is available, or he's asking to create that new group right now? So that's what we need, this extra little flag that says, force the new group now.
Yeah, so I understand the use case. I think it would be useful for the streaming scenario as well. Typically, HESP is based on something which is slightly similar to switch between tracks. However, and it is a question that come in the chat as well, it is very dangerous in the streaming scenario, because if you have thousands of people joining every second a live feed, you might have only keyframe at the publishers. So we would need the mechanism to let the publisher just ignore the question, ignore the new group. I don't know if it is an error that we should have, or if it is something which is just no, I will not do this, and I'm fine with both, but we must have something which does not force the publisher to have a group for this, because otherwise it might be impossible to support.
I think that I'm almost saying the same thing as Gwendol here, and I think we just need to add a bit more to the PR that covers the case of imagine the case where you have 1,000 subscribers joining all like half a second apart, and everyone requests an iframe or whatever. There's some event that's caused that, right? So, and we have a situation where the original publisher only wants to do a max of every 10 seconds. I mean, the design here is clear of like what's supposed to happen is when the first request comes in, it does it. And then it's going to run its own timer that it knows it's like, hey, I'm not going to do another one for 10 seconds. But all those requests, so it got a request for, let me call them, 23, 24, 25, 26, and it's not doing them because it already did 22. And these are like, coming in. But actually, I guess they'd all just be for 23, 23, 23. But then at the end of its 5 second, when it's 5 second, the timer expires, then it does issue 23, and all of those people get that 23. So I think this mechanism puts the control of the timing of what's your minimum time that what's the minimum size GOP sequence that you'll make, or minimum group size. It pushes that back to the original publisher, and the original publisher, if you don't want a DDoS situation, we should say that the original publisher should have some minimum time that it waits before it publishes a second one. And if it gets any in that time, it keeps those to the end of the expiry time and then issues one that satisfies all of those. So I think that would help. I think that would deal with the DDoS case. So I would suggest that as sort of like improvement to the PR a little bit.
Thanks for this concrete proposal. I wanted to say that I don't disagree at all that this is a requirement. This definitely is something that we need to support if we're going to support real-time use cases. And I'm glad to have it kind of spelled out explicitly. I do question a little bit whether this is the right layer to be solving this at, because it feels very much like an application layer concern in some ways. But I think the place where this kind of intersects with more generic needs at the MOQ transport layer is maybe just a general approach to fan in. And I feel like we could use this for other use cases, but this feels a little bit specific. There are other things that we might want to, aggregate in different ways. For example, like we have some use cases for like log aggregation. So client statistics, playback statistics for, broadcasts that you might want to roll up from the delivery edge, all the way back. And the original publisher is ultimately going to want some aggregation of that data. But what that aggregation looks like is going to be different for different use cases. So I am on the fence about the details of this, and I'll need to sit with it.
Fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted a clarification question. So when this is received, you're not actually changing the main stream, right?
No.
Okay. I just wanted to double check it. So, because I'm familiar with I think the catalog example of like, you might want to get the entire catalog and then get diffs from there or something is like a good simple example to work on in my mind, because it's just like, even though it's not video, I think it's, it's simpler. And I know there are a number of ways of doing this with video and different approaches, but I'm still I can't figure out why we wouldn't just create another track for this. That's the joining track, and just grab the most recent group from that. And the reason is, I think you laid out a number of like great requirements here. You want this thing to be cacheable. You want to make sure you don't end up with a situation where 1,000 people join at once and like, the publisher falls over and all of those things. And like, we made the system so like objects kind of deal with that fairly well, hopefully. Fingers crossed we made it so it deals with it well. Seems like we could accomplish that with our existing mechanisms and not have to, like once, I can't remember whether it was Will or someone else commented on caching, maybe someone else, caching messages. I was like, oh, that gives me like the heebie-jeebies, right? Like the only thing I really want to cache in the system is objects.
Right. I think there are the normal aggregation rules. I did think about if we can make it as a separate track, because that's where it started. And maybe I need to think through clearly, but the thing here is that the aggregation rules change. In this one, it's not like aggregated. And I never have to send an upstream thing on the track. Here, the aggregation rule basically has a rule saying that I receive new groups for certain thing, and I know when it's like a pending request that gets eventually satisfied when the data stream comes in. And you don't want to have a new group for 25 comes later, and the aggregation rule has to be rerun again. It's either we do it as a subscribe parameter or subscribe update. The rules are different compared to having something like a pure track and subscribe, where you just aggregate once and you can update, sure, but you'll not get the trigger that you're looking for. If you start writing down, you'll see where it basically fails.
No, I think it has to go back to the origin if there's no outstanding like subscriptions that could satisfy it, right?
Right, that's fun. But here the subscription is already satisfied. There are multiple subscribers. The subscription is satisfied, and the original publisher is published in the track. Right. But here we are asking, in some cases, to go all the way to the publisher. Yep. In some cases, don't go to all the way to the publisher. But with if you're using a track and the classic subscription model, you once you have active subscription, you will not send that new subscribe all the way up to the original publisher because it's aggregated already.
Yeah, but in the application specification, if you just say like, when you do this, always ask only for like a single group, then those subscriptions will naturally like aggregate on the way up. And if there's no outstanding subscriptions for that specific group and it needs to be generated, then it'll go all the way back to the origin, right? So like, I mean, I get that I get we would have to in warp or something say like, when you do this thing, like, you know, only ask for one group, otherwise like weird things may happen kind of thing. But I don't know.
Like I still, if even if you ask for one group, it's more like a filter. If there's an active subscription and if the group is in the future or something, you don't forward the subscription upstream, right? You wait for the data to come to open the filter to send the data downstream.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it'd just be great to use subscription aggregation and like caching and all those mechanisms we've already built. So that's kind of why I'm going in this direction. But
one thing for sure, yeah, is that this builds on all those things. We don't want to. That's the whole point, is that we want to use the caching wherever it's possible. We want to use aggregation, but there's small changes in aggregation rule here that says that when you should aggregate and when you should let it go up. That's the thing. How we code it might be slightly different, but I'm happy to discuss further. But this needs to be at the API layer. So yeah, sure. Thanks.
Alan pointed out that the document says not to include filters on upstream subscriptions today. That's also an interesting observation. Anyway.
Right.
So speaking as an individual, a +1 to people saying that original publishers must be able to have discretion and that the subscriber cannot force the original publisher to do anything here regarding minting new groups. But my follow-up is, what about relays? Like, what is the mandatory behavior of relays? Am I obligated to forward this to the original publisher in case the original publisher supports it, or can I like cache information about what the publisher is going to do? Or is it purely optional if I forward this signal, however it's communicated?
I think this goes back to what Mo explained about the subscription state. So when a relay gets a new group for a subscription state that's matching the current latest group, it will have to forward it upstream, because if not, the subscribers will not be satisfied. On the other hand, if the subscription state is already moved forward for what you requested for, then it did not have to forward it for, because
okay. So essentially mandatory for relays.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Thanks. Hey, Victor.
Yeah, I think this is definitely very important.
Victor, somehow your audio is really, really feeble.
Is it really quiet?
Very quiet. Yeah.
Is this better? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, I think this is really important to implement for real-time applications. My observation is that we should probably attempt to use existing MOQ things, and in this case is probably subscribe update. But my other observation is that this should be opt-in on publisher, which is to say, if I'm real-time publication, in publisher we say I support group update, like request for new groups. And if I'm like an original publisher of a live stream that's gonna have 1 million views, I don't relate to forward this to me, please drop it like it's the first really hop. Because you're getting your keyframe every n seconds, and that's just how those kind of live streams work. That's it. Yeah.
That makes sense. Definitely, we need a way on the publisher to either throttle it or say if it can support it or not. Yeah, that part is not lacking in the PR, and we can definitely work on that.
Okay. Thanks for all the discussion, everyone. I want to end with some questions. I don't know if we need to do a formal show of hands, but first, if anyone does not think this is a problem that we need to solve at some layer of MOQ, I would like you to, I'm going to unlock the queue. I'd like you to enter the queue now, because I'm hearing pretty strong feedback that we need to solve this problem somehow. Okay, so Suhas, good job. You've unveiled a real problem here. Okay, the only dissent at like non-spelling issues that I've heard is really like the Mike's assertion that maybe this MOQT is the wrong layer. We should do it at a layer above within the MOQ framework. Mike or anyone else, do you have like a specific proposal that you would like to maybe work on for the group, or is that just kind of an initial reaction where you're actually fine with it at MOQT?
Yeah, my thoughts on this are barely baked. My initial inclination is like, can we solve it in this layer? And let's like thoroughly ask that question. Like, can we say the original publisher subscribes to a track or a tracks that represent an aggregation of feedback mechanisms from everybody downstream? And can we make that generic in some way that like Relays can deal with kind of a generic aggregation feature rather than something that's application specific? But it's not a concrete and fully thought out proposal at this point.
All right, let me just, before Magnus interjects, let me just say, we can have that discussion in the issue. And if, there are ideas that come up there, we can certainly discuss them. Magnus?
Yeah, that was almost what I was saying. Is I think it's clear saying continue working on this. We need to discuss, I think, how exactly it looks like. We have one suggestion in the PR which can be worked and discussed, and I expect Suhas to, based on the feedback I got today, to further enhance its proposal. But it's up to the other working group members here to review this and think about is there properties, etc., which would be better suited. So bring it up in the issues, and I think we have a direction forward.
Yeah, I think, like I said, if you have issues, if you decide, Mike or anyone else, that MOQT is the wrong layer, please talk about it in the issue. Otherwise, I expect pretty big revisions to the PR, and we can talk about spelling there to your heart's content. So please go participate in GitHub. Alan?
Yeah, I think maybe it would be helpful, I'm guessing for Suhas, like one of the big, it is a spelling issue, but do people want a new message, or do people want to build this on subscribe and subscribe update? Because I think it makes a big difference in the next rev of the PR. And so I don't know, can you just get like a show of vibes or something in that issue?
In 3 minutes, I'm not sure we can.
And I would suggest people go read the proper PR, because I think, etc., and think a bit more before they answer that question. Actually,
I'll tell you what. Like, actually, I think this is what mailing lists are for. Even more so than the PR, because the PR is a little too low level for this. Let's start. I will start a thread on the mailing list asking like, what is the right form of this message? And you can send email. You can just be a dinosaur and use email to talk about how to do this. Ian.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see us collectively like explore and actually work through like kind of the various ways we could do this, either with the existing mechanisms or with the new mechanism. And it doesn't need to be like exhaustive. I don't need text for everything, but like, a solid, like a few slides on kind of what are the pros and cons of different approaches would be helpful for me at least to understand. Because I think, you said a number of things to us about why the existing mechanism didn't work. I'm convinced that I could do something to make them work. But the question is like how weird and like bizarre would those become? And so maybe if those become weird and bizarre enough, like it's pretty obvious like why we need this new mechanism. But I can try to work through that like a little bit more detail in slides or otherwise, just to try to pound out some stuff. And I'm happy to like share slides I'm working on with you so you can point out all the ways in which
let's try to define the problem space on the list, and then maybe that can shape a discussion on July 7th that kind of bakes off those what rises to the top there. Colin?
I'd love
Very
to
briefly,
see.
Please.
Yeah, okay. I'd love to see a separate PR that showed how to do this in an update that we could just directly compare against. And I'd love to see a sketch out of some slides that's more like the type of solution Ian's talking about. I've thought about that a little bit too. And yeah, I think we just need some slides to reason through that.
Mo, very briefly.
I agree with Alan. It's good for the people that are looking at above MOQ solutions to talk to people that have already explored that and had some issues. So if we want to have a side meeting or side thread or something, either on Slack or on the list, let's do that. I even tried to do this in LOQ, and then I realized that there are all the issues that involves. So I think when we have a discussion about those, it'll be clear for the people that think it's easy to layer, that there's enough issues that it's better to do in MOQ itself.
All right, Suhas, you get the last word on this topic. Be very brief, please.
Yes, I will do a PR on subscribe update using subscribe or subscribe update, and I will work with Ian and maybe Cullen Moe to get an initials. Like these are the 3 possible ways to do things, and we'll have something presented for the next interim. Maybe that might be a good next steps if people agree with that.
Thank you, Suhas. Excellent presentation. On the 7th, we will almost certainly follow up on this issue, and we will try once again to get parameterization into the agenda. So thanks all for joining us. Thank you, Suhas, for taking notes, and Alan for helping take notes. And we will see you in a little over 2 weeks.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Draft 12 was coming soon, so look for it.
Cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.